Story 1. I was a writing tutor in college, and there was this tiny senior Vietnamese man named Nhatnam who would come to me for help with his English 101 writing assignments. Super nice, quiet man, militantly polite and humble. They got a prompt along the lines of, "Write about a memory you'll never forget." He handed me his essay to check over, and it was a 4-page description of how he used to crawl through tunnels and stab people. He described coating himself in mud so thick he would blend into the walls. One story involved him silently moving through a room of sleeping soldiers and killing each one. His writing was a new English speaker's matter-of-fact descriptions of what killing people with a knife is like. For example, on Thursday I killed 3 at the entrance, then the doctor and his patient, then the 4 youngsters in the big room, then I killed the radio man. They were eating, so I had some rice and fish. Then I killed the 2 men at the back entrance. Then I left and rode my motorcycle to my mom's house and we played cards. Story 2. I work at a top security mental hospital. I know a few ex-cult leaders, killers, cannibals, and a lot of interesting people. One of the most dangerous guys we have is on one-to-one with a nurse's assistant. One-to-one means that he can never be unsupervised. He gets in fights and always has a fresh injury. For a while, he wore this weird kind of helmet that I think was protecting a head wound. He's actually not such a bad guy. He's silly and likes to joke around. He just needs his medicine and extra help. I get a fist bump from him whenever we meet. Story 3. My aunt lost a leg in an accident and is confined to a chair. One time, a guy gave her a little push up a ramp to help her out. I can understand why she would not like this, but she was so angry she berated him, then jumped out of her chair and bit him on the leg. She terrifies me. Story 4. My Muay Thai coach is the kindest, most understanding, calm, and collected person I know. He is a true expert at Muay Thai. The speed at which he moves, strikes, and thinks is incredible. Story 5. User Suikatangsu copied their answer word for word from user Nagagmo about Sacramento City Psycho. This type of need for attention by copying stories of others is concerning and sociopathic. They scare me. Story 6. This dad of a girl on my daughter's soccer team is the attractive, charming sports dad, always on, making jokes, bending over backward to seem like the good guy. Everyone loves him. Over the years our daughters have played together. I've witnessed a handful of things that make me believe he's not nearly as chill and nice as he wants everyone to think he is. There's a darkness to him, and it scares me. Story 7. My dad was a hoarder, like on television. Someone gave me a cordless drill for my birthday, and he found out about it. He wanted to borrow it, so I said okay. Fast forward 6 months, and I asked him to return it. He did. But the unsettling thing was I saw him drive up to my house beforehand and look at my windows. He couldn't see me looking out. He had the coldest, nastiest look on his face. He was beyond angry into dangerous territory. You just can't see a person the same way after you've been given a glimpse inside. It makes me chilled even now. Story 8. I've met the pastor of a local megachurch twice. He's tall, conventionally attractive, with a winning smile. I am a lesbian. I feel these things are relevant to mention because his effect is terrifying. He walked into an office where I used to work at the front desk, and the second he came in, I had to be the best receptionist he had ever seen. I needed him to notice me. I needed him to see what a good job I was doing, and I needed him to walk out that door thinking about me after his appointment was over. It was not romantic or sexual attraction. It was something I had never felt before in my life, and the second he walked out, I felt like the air came rushing back into the room. I was like, what just happened? Good thing I'll never let it happen again. The next time he came in, the same thing happened. I intend never to let our paths cross again. Story 9. I once had a job at a company that employed a murderer as a security guard, obviously before he was known to be a murderer. He seemed like a fairly nice but rather moody young man. While I was working there, a child in the broader community disappeared from her home one evening, and that was all over the news by the next morning. I got into work, and there he was at his post, grinning silently, while his colleague explained that the missing girl was from his neighborhood, and that he had stayed up late assisting police and neighbors in the search. Unfortunately, they had found no sign of the girl, and she remained missing for more than a year. I'm sure by now you have figured out that this young security guard was the one who took that poor child and killed her, and what's more, he stashed her body in cold storage on the premises of my workplace. This gruesome fact was revealed some years after he left his job, when he casually confessed the crime to his girlfriend. It was later discovered that he had also killed an older woman, at least a year before he was hired at my company as a security guard. He wasn't scary in his manner, ever. That's what makes my memory of him so scary now. Story 10. My boss is nice enough, but she has the ability to fire me, take away my livelihood, and put my family in a terrible situation in an instant. Also, I have no protection because she is the head of human resources. Story 11. My ex-fiancé's son, when he was 8, would plan brutal ways to kill his father and then tell him about it in graphic detail when he was told no. He tried to take my son's head off with a shovel when my son told him no once, but we caught him at the last second. I refused to see him or have my kids around him after that. It all came out on a weekend visit. That kid is a psychopath. His father was in total denial. Story 12. My rapist, who was a person I dated, is also a serial rapist running free. I still look over my shoulder. Yes, I went to the police. No, they did not care. Story 13. My cousin once drunkenly told her boyfriend that if he ever left her, she would kill him before letting him walk away. He smirked and said the feeling is mutual. It was a lot creepier the way he said it. Add to that the fact that he's always struck me as a little off because he's always completely unemotional and unaffected, just straight American Psycho vibes, and I don't know if he was joking, but I wouldn't want to find out. Story 14. I believe my ex-husband's family member shot their spouse in the head over a cup of coffee during a nasty divorce and got away with it for a lot of reasons. I hesitate to say more because they're alive and loose. Story 15. My father died 2 years ago, but the man was a monster. The only emotion he seemed to feel was rage. I wouldn't even call it anger. It was so extreme. I felt safer handling venomous snakes. He was that bad. Story 16. I haven't seen him in over a decade. I used to get rides to work from a guy who liked to tell stories of his criminal background. He robbed 7 banks along a single stretch of road outside Cleveland in the 1990s. He just got out after a 20-year stint in federal prison and even showed pictures of the cartel boss and mob boss he befriended in prison. He used to tell me how he kept a mask and a pipe in the car in case he needed them. I figured he meant a weed pipe since he smoked a lot, the synthetic stuff because he was on parole and couldn't smoke the real stuff. Then he whipped out a lead pipe and Halloween mask. Then there's the story of him getting a bouncer in front of a club because the bouncer was being rude and refusing to let him back inside. I never met a guy who scared me as much as that dude. Especially when he got a chihuahua from a kennel that had kennel cough. He used to talk about the ways he'd murder the original owner because he knew it was abused before. He was really sweet with that dog. Even gave it a baby voice when he dropped me off with my girlfriend after work. Story 17. Afraid? Probably more like very much aware of them when they are near or could be. Childhood friend. A pathological liar. Is a criminal with a criminal record. Is rather bulky, not fat. I am 99% sure they would not harm me or my family and would likely help when asked. But there's a permanent aura of menace that I cannot overlook. Like a wolf that I grew up with, but that I'm aware still remains a wild animal. Story 18. My stepbrother stabbed someone to death over $20. And that is just one point in the long, horrific story that is his life. He's been this way since I met him at 5 years old. For anyone curious, I'm pretty certain there was no trauma or anything that caused him to be this way. His brother is a great person. But yeah, some people are just born wrong. Story 19. My cousin. I have been waiting for decades for him to be caught for something. I will get interviewed by the news and it will not be the typical. He was such a nice, quiet guy. It will be, I figured he was a serial killer since I was old enough to know what that was. Story 20. I know a guy who's a skinhead currently serving 25 years for killing and beheading 2 people in his front yard one night. He keeps the pictures of the crime scene in his cell, not because he likes to look at his work, but because he likes to show people his work. He's also killed 1 cellmate and maimed another. He's obsessed with hunting and frequently talks about cleaning animals. He's currently residing in high confinement, which is 23 hours in a cell and 1 hour out of his cell. He has refused food and causes food to be thrown when it's brought to him by anyone but a white person. He's not doing all this for show. I honestly feel the man has a disconnect with his humanity and thinks he's above mankind. He scares the absolute life out of me, but I don't dare show it. Story 21. My ex has a paranoid psychosis, and he saw and heard things that weren't there. It was very scary. The relationship was total hell, so I really wish that I will never meet that guy again. He used antipsychotic medication when I started dating him, and then he was a very nice guy. But after he stopped taking his medication, life became hell. Story 22. A male relative was suspected in multiple missing persons cases and has been convicted of attempted murder and other violent crimes as well. He was on trial for taking part in arms smuggling the last time I heard mentions of him. There were always hushed rumors of him working as a problem solver for organized crime. I try not to have any connections with that side of the family. I left my hometown almost 2 decades ago, and I don't even want to know what he's up to nowadays. Story 23. My ex, an ex-Marine, got my name tattooed on him a month after meeting me. He was an expert in interrogations and used that to convince me of many things while he destroyed my identity slowly over time. He physically assaulted me many times and got away with it due to the isolation level he had kept me at. If someone hadn't heard our last argument, I would be gone today. He was also diagnosed with schizophrenia during our marriage and refused to take his medicine. He had delusions of being followed and of being poisoned by me. I still have a lot of therapy to get through. It's already been 4 years since the divorce. Story 24. A former coworker who was a former Central Intelligence Agency agent. I say former, but I have my doubts, as she proudly flashed her Australian passport, talking about how she was going to take a trip to Afghanistan for a couple of weeks for vacation back in the 2010s. Story 25. My old infantry platoon sergeant. When we deployed, it was his 4th deployment since 2009. He was in his late 40s, a lean, wiry guy, and had many qualification badges. He had some wild stories, too. I saw him lose his temper a few times, and that was not something I ever wanted to be on the receiving end of. Just from the way he carried himself, we all knew that he was the most dangerous person in the platoon. My favorite quote from him was when we were receiving a concept of operations report from a young lieutenant and he got irritated with the plan. I was stacking bodies in Iraq when you were still nursing from your mother's breast for nutrition. Story 26. I knew this guy who came off as nice but a little needy. He was about 6 feet 6 inches tall and over 300 pounds. But that wasn't the scary thing about him. He just had this way of talking and looking at you, and by that, I mean anyone that didn't feel right. It just makes me think about the people who say they felt like something wasn't right when they meet someone who ends up being a serial killer. Story 27. I met Rachel the first time at my buddy's house. She was giving someone a poor quality basement tattoo. Cute, petite, dark hair and eyes. We hit it off and started meeting up a couple of times a week. I even let her meet my child. I began to notice some drug issues, but I kept my concerns separate and enjoyed spending time with her until we both moved on after about 7 months. The story was on the news briefly before my phone started ringing with calls from several friends asking if I knew my ex had harmed someone and left the body in a steel drum in her garage. No more reckless relationships for me. Story 28. I knew someone who had schizophrenia. They were very unpredictable. I was always on edge around them, felt like I had a gun to my head. I never knew if they were going to be cool with me or try and attack me. Schizophrenia is terrible, and it's tragic that people have to suffer from it. I have nothing but sympathy for people with schizophrenia, even if that one person I knew scared the life out of me. Story 29. My father. I think he's a clinical psychopath. I allow myself to make such a statement because I am a psychologist by education and have the knowledge to assess it, and I also discuss this in therapy. When I was about 8 to 12 years old, he threatened me that for every grade of C or lower, he would cut off a bit of my hair until I was completely bald. Obviously, there was more. I've been struggling with depression and anxiety for years. Story 30. My neighbor is honestly the scariest person I know. He seems normal at a glance, but the way he talks about his hobby of collecting obscure and eerie artifacts gives me the chills. I made the mistake of asking about it once, and the stories he told were straight out of a horror movie. Safe to say, I keep the small talk to a minimum now. Story 31. My buddy's dad was drunk and hanging out with us. This was like 20 years ago. He was talking about Vietnam and how he got so used to killing people that it was hard to stop when he got back. Story 32. My dad, looking back, he was pretty mild towards me compared to my mom and sister, but I was always scared of him after seeing the way he treated my mom after their divorce. Alcoholism. Story 33. It was April 2022. I was walking down a serene country lane near the quiet, infamous village of Rainford, United Kingdom. I decided to take an alternative route home across a pasture as the darkness was fast approaching. While I ambled through this pasture, an absolutely colossal and ripped man who looked like Edward Newgate from the show One Piece screamed at me in a comedic Scouse accent to get off his land. I jumped out of my skin, but I was drunk, so I said something defiant to him, which riled the guy. He then bellowed further ultimatums at me and threatened to have a scrap with me, so I told him to go away. He then told me that his name was Honorius Yorick Claymount III and asked me to meet him at 6 p.m. the following Tuesday in a car park in Manchester to have a knife fight. Needless to say, I absolutely ran away,